In the freezing rain near Lake Superior, a retired Navy SEAL lived alone inside a small wooden cabin. Suddenly, he heard a faint sound outside the door, and at first he thought it was only a tree branch striking the porch in the wind. But when Orson Pike opened the door, a pregnant German shepherd stood there, trembling, muddy, painfully thin, and barely strong enough to stay on her feet. He rushed her
Easy
inside,
there, Lumen.
wrapped her in warmth, and
You're
placed
safe
food
now.
and water beside the fire. But the dog refused to eat, refused to rest, and kept staring toward the dark window as if someone was still waiting outside. Then Orson saw the tag on her collar, carrying the name of a fallen brother in arms he had spent 10 years trying to forget. Where are you watching from tonight? Share your thoughts, and please like and subscribe to help us reach 1,000 subscribers so we can keep telling stories like this. Winter did not fall gently on Copper Harbor, Michigan. It came down like an old judge with silver hair and cold hands, laying its sentence across the black pines, the empty roads, and the iron-gray body of Lake Superior. By day, the lake stretched beyond the town like a sleeping giant under a sheet of steel. By night, it disappeared into the dark, leaving only the sound of wind moving over ice and water, as if the world itself were breathing through clenched teeth. The cabins scattered along the northern road glowed with small yellow windows, each one a stubborn little promise against the weather. Beyond them stood the forest, tall pines, bare birches, and frozen brush bent under the weight of sleet. It was a beautiful place, but not a soft one. Copper Harbor did not comfort a man unless he had first learned how to be lonely. Orson Pike had learned. At 58, Orson still carried the frame of a man shaped by service rather than vanity. He stood just over 6 feet, broad through the shoulders, solid through the chest, with the kind of strength that came from years of cold mornings, heavy packs, and work done without applause. His face was square and weather-browned, the jaw hard, the cheekbones cut deep by time and northern wind. His eyes were gray-blue, quiet and sunken with thought, the kind of eyes that did not reveal much until grief passed behind them, like a shadow behind glass. His dark brown hair was cropped short, though the top had grown just long enough to look wind-tossed even indoors. Silver marked his temples. A trimmed beard shadowed his jaw, neat enough to show discipline, rough enough to prove he had stopped caring what polite rooms expected of him. He wore an old faded green military jacket over a thick brown-gray shirt, dark jeans, worn leather boots, and a scratched military watch that had outlived 3 straps in one war. Orson lived alone in a cabin 2 miles off the main road, near a pair of old pines locals called the Twin Pines, though no one had bothered to tell the trees they were famous. His cabin was warm, stocked, orderly, and silent. The firewood was stacked by size. The rifle was locked. The coffee tin was always full. The first aid kit was checked every month. A man could mistake that kind of order for peace. Orson knew better. That night, freezing rain hammered the roof so hard it sounded like gravel thrown by an angry hand. The storm had rolled in after sunset, turning the porch steps slick, coating the railings in glass, and making the pines hiss and bend in the dark. Inside, the fire had burned down to orange ribs beneath a skin of ash. The air smelled of cedar smoke, black coffee, old wool, and metal dust from the radio parts spread across the kitchen table. Orson sat beneath the yellow lamp, repairing a shortwave radio that had belonged to a fisherman from Eagle Harbor. His hands moved with slow precision. He liked radios because they were honest in their brokenness. A cracked wire failed. A corroded contact refused current. A loose knob could be tightened. Unlike men, machines rarely lied about where they had come apart. On the wall beside the door hung old maps of Lake Superior and the northern woods. Above the mantel sat a stopped military clock, its hands fixed at 2:17. On a shelf near the window rested a framed photograph turned face down. Orson did not need to see it to know the image. He and Brennan Thorne, 10 years younger, snow on their shoulders, both grinning like fools after surviving a winter operation that should have killed them. Brennan had been 39 when he died, dark-haired, warm-eyed, reckless in the most generous way. He had been the sort of man who joked before danger, prayed during it, and went back afterward to make sure no one had been left behind. Orson had gone on living. That was the part he had never quite forgiven. He adjusted the radio dial. Static hissed softly. Then came the sound. Scratch. Orson stopped. The house held its breath around him. Rain struck the roof. A branch scraped somewhere along the outer wall. The fire shifted and dropped a coal into ash. Scratch. Softer this time. Lower. Not on the wall. On the door. Orson's right hand moved toward the flashlight before he decided to move it. Old habits lived in the muscles long after a man pretended to be done with them. He stood slowly, listening. The scratching came again, followed by a thin sound that the storm nearly swallowed, a whimper, weak as thread. For one strange second, Orson did not move. He had heard men make small sounds like that in snow, men who were too cold to shout, men who had used the last of their strength on a name. He looked at the door. "No," he whispered, though he did not know whether he was speaking to the storm, the past, or himself. He crossed the room, turned the deadbolt, and opened the door. The cold came in first, sharp and wet, slapping his face with needles of rain. The porch light flickered in the wind. Beyond it, the forest was a black wall, veined with silver water. On the top step stood a German shepherd. She was female, about 5 years old, with a black and gold coat buried under mud, rainwater, pine needles, and bits of dead leaves. Beneath the dirt, Orson could see honey-gold fur along her chest, legs, and cheeks, with a heavy black saddle running over her back and down toward a dark tail. Her body was thin, too thin, the shoulders showing under-soaked fur, but her belly was round and heavy with pregnancy. Her legs trembled so violently, her paws clicked against the frozen boards. A pale golden mark, shaped like a tear, lay beneath her right eye, visible even through the mud, giving her face an expression of grief that no animal should have had to wear. One edge of her left ear carried a small old scar. She did not bark. She simply looked at Orson with amber-brown eyes so steady, so exhausted, and so full of purpose that his throat tightened. "Oh, girl," he said, voice roughening before he could stop it. The shepherd took one step forward, her front legs folded. Orson caught her before she struck the porch. She was colder than she should have been. Not dead cold, not yet, but close enough that something old and trained inside him began counting risks. Exposure, shock, exhaustion, pregnancy, unknown distance traveled, possible injury. Something softer inside him only thought, "Who let you come this far alone?" He pulled her inside and kicked the door shut against the storm. The dog collapsed on the braided rug near the hearth. Orson moved quickly, not frantic, because panic was a luxury that never saved anything. He laid a towel over her back, fetched another from the warming rack, and wiped mud from her paws. She flinched once when his hand passed near her ribs, then held still, watching his face as if measuring whether kindness was real. "You're safe," Orson said. The words sounded strange in his cabin. He set down a shallow bowl of warm water. The shepherd lowered her nose toward it, sniffed, then lifted her head again, not toward the fire, not toward the food tin Orson had already opened, but toward the door. "No," he said gently. "You're not going back out." The dog gave a low whine. It was not a plea for comfort. It was an instruction. Orson frowned. "What is it?" She tried to rise. Her legs failed. She dragged herself half a foot toward the door before he caught her shoulders and eased her back down. Her belly tightened once beneath the wet fur. Orson's jaw clenched, pregnant. Close, maybe. He reached for the worn leather collar at her neck, loosening it so it would not press against her throat. A metal tag clinked against his watch. He turned it toward the light. The front read, "Lumen." E. Quinn, the name was clean beneath the mud, as if rubbed by years of touch. "Lumen," he said softly. The dog's ears twitched. Her eyes shifted to him. "So that's you." Then he saw the second piece. Not part of the original tag, but a small strip of copper fastened to the back with wire, old and darkened by weather. The engraving was uneven, done by hand. Pike, cabin by twin pines. Brennan trusted him. For a moment the rain vanished, the room vanished. The dog, the fire, the radio, the clock stopped at 2:17. All of it fell away, and Orson was back in White Wind, 10 years younger, screaming a name into a radio that answered with static. Brennan. His fingers closed around the tag until the edge bit into his skin. He had not spoken Brennan Thorne's name aloud in months, maybe longer. People in town knew better than to ask. The dead, if left undisturbed, sometimes gave the living permission to keep moving. Orson had built his life around that lie. But here was the name, carried through freezing rain on the neck of a starving pregnant dog. A dog named Lumen, light. The old military clock gave a small click on the mantel, though the hands did not move. Orson turned sharply toward it. The clock had been dead for 8 years. He had never fixed it because some broken things deserved to remain honest. Yet in that silent cabin, right after Brennan's name returned, the dead clock clicked once like a boot step in an empty hallway. Lumen heard it too. Her head lifted. She looked not at the clock, but at the face-down photograph on the shelf. Then she whined again and pushed her nose toward the door. A cold thread slid down Orson's spine. He did not believe in ghosts. He believed in weather, training, guilt, and the terrible mathematics of decisions made too late. But there are moments in a man's life when disbelief becomes smaller than the thing standing in front of him. And that night, the thing standing before Orson was not a miracle with wings. It was a mud-covered German shepherd with a tear-shaped mark under one eye and a message from a dead man. Orson drew a breath through his nose. "Who is E. Quinn?" he asked. Lumen answered by trying to stand again. This time she made it to her feet. Barely. Her paws slid on the wooden floor. She staggered toward the door, turned, and fixed him with a look so clear it felt almost human. Not because she understood language the way people did, but because desperation has its own grammar. "Come." Orson looked at the storm-battered window. The rain was still coming hard, washing the porch clean, erasing every track she had made to reach him. If he waited until morning, the trail might be gone. If he took her out now, she might collapse for good. He crouched beside her. "You know where you came from." Her tail moved once, not a wag, a confirmation. Orson rested his hand lightly over the old copper strip. Brennan trusted him. He thought of Brennan laughing through cracked lips in Alaska, handing peppermint candy to a crying child while snow buried the road behind them. He thought of the last radio call, the static, the order Orson had given, because command was sometimes a knife a man had to hold by the blade. He thought of 10 years of telling himself that surviving was not the same as failing. Lumen pressed her wet nose against his wrist. The touch broke something small and sealed inside him. "Easy," he whispered. "I'm listening." He moved fast then. He wrapped Lumen in a dry wool blanket, not tight enough to trap her legs, just enough to hold warmth. He pulled on his faded green military jacket, zipped it over the brown-gray shirt, and took the heavy flashlight from the hook. He tucked a first aid pouch into one pocket and his phone into another. At the door, he paused only long enough to turn the face-down photograph upright. Brennan Thorne smiled from the past, snow bright on his shoulders. Orson looked at him for one heartbeat. "If this is your idea of knocking," he muttered. "You always did have lousy manners." It was not much of a joke, but it was the first one he had made to Brennan in 10 years. Lumen stood trembling beside the door, head low, eyes burning with purpose. Outside, the freezing rain hammered the porch, and the forest beyond the twin pines waited like a dark sea. Orson opened the door. The cold struck them both. He stepped out first, boots, finding the slick boards, flashlight beam cutting through the rain. Lumen followed, weak but certain, turning once to make sure he was behind her. Orson looked down at the pregnant dog, at the mud on her paws, at the old copper message on her collar. "All right," he said quietly. "Lead the way." And for the first time in 10 years, Orson Pike left his cabin not to escape the past, but to follow a promise that had somehow survived the storm. Orson did not let Lumen lead him far that night. He wanted to. The old part of him, the part trained to move toward distress before fear had time to dress itself in reason, wanted to follow the pregnant German shepherd straight into the freezing rain. But one look at her legs told him the truth. Lumen was running on the last coins of strength her body owned, and if he spent them carelessly, he might lose the only guide he had. So he stepped only as far as the porch. Rain struck his face, cold and sharp, blurring the beam of his flashlight. Lumen stood beside him, trembling beneath the wool blanket, nose lifted toward the narrow forest road beyond the twin pines. Her black and gold coat was still clotted with mud and pine needles, her heavy belly low, her paws sliding on the icy boards. Yet her eyes remained fixed on the darkness with the terrible certainty of a mother who had left something behind. Orson shone the light over the porch steps. Mud. Not much, but enough. A broken line of paw prints led from the yard toward the old logging path, already thinning under the rain. He crouched, pressed 2 fingers into one print, and felt the cold water filling it. "Not tonight," he murmured. Lumen whined. "I know." His voice softened, though his face did not. "But you fall out there, and we both fail whoever sent you." The word fail tasted bitter. He carried Lumen back inside, though she resisted weakly, not with anger but with grief. He laid her near the fire, wrapped dry towels around her shoulders, and placed the tag where he could see it from the chair. Lumen, E. Quinn Pike, cabin by Twin Pines. Brennan trusted him. For the rest of the night, Orson did not sleep. He sat in the old wooden chair with his elbows on his knees, listening to the freezing rain lose its fury one drop at a time. Whenever Lumen stirred, he rose. Whenever she lifted her head toward the door, he touched her shoulder and told her, "Morning, we go at first light." He did not know whether she understood the words, but she seemed to understand the promise. By dawn, the storm had worn itself thin. The rain stopped first, then the wind. In its place came a silence so clean it seemed newly made. Outside, every branch in the forest wore a sleeve of ice. The pines glittered under the pale blue light, and the ground shone with frozen puddles and black mud. Far beyond the trees, Lake Superior reflected the morning like a sheet of hammered tin. Orson loaded Lumen into the passenger side of his old truck, wrapping the blanket around her body and leaving her head free. The truck was a dark green Ford with rust along the wheel wells and a heater that worked only when it felt respected. Orson had kept it running for 16 years through stubbornness, spare parts, and language unsuitable for church. Lumen did not lie down. She sat upright with effort, nose pointed toward the windshield. "All right," Orson said, starting the engine. "Show me." The road was not far, but winter made distance dishonest. 2 miles could feel like 20 when black ice hid underwater and branches leaned low across the path. Lumen guided him not by barking, but by small movements. A lift of the head, a turn of the muzzle, a low sound whenever he slowed at the wrong fork. Past the twin pines, beyond a sagging split-rail fence, they turned onto a narrow lane Orson had not used in years. A small weathered sign stood half buried under ice. North Shore Bird Path. The letters were faded, but someone had once painted tiny wings along the border. Orson remembered hearing that local children came here in spring to watch warblers and cranes pass overhead. In winter, the path looked abandoned, like a memory no one had visited in a long time. Lumen grew more restless. Her paws pressed into the truck seat. Her breath fogged the window. At one bend in the lane, she gave a sudden, sharp whine and pushed her nose against the glass. Orson slowed. On the left stood a cedar post with a strip of blue cloth tied around it, stiff with ice. It fluttered once in the morning wind, though there was barely any wind at all. Lumen stared at it. Then she lowered her head and made a sound so small that Orson felt it more than heard it. The cloth was not random. It was the same faded blue as a scrap caught in the edge of Lumen's collar, a piece Orson had noticed but not yet removed. Whoever had marked this path had done it for someone, or something, that needed to remember the way. A strange heaviness settled in Orson's chest. This was not just a dog guessing through the woods. Someone had prepared her. Someone had known there might come a day when a woman could not call for help, and a dog would have to carry the message instead. Orson looked at Lumen. "Who taught you all this, girl?" Lumen did not answer. She only looked forward, toward the end of the lane. The house appeared a minute later. It sat in a small clearing beyond a stand of white birch, a modest wooden cabin with a dark green roof and a narrow porch. It was smaller than Orson's place, softer somehow, with bird feeders hanging from the eaves and a row of wind chimes made from shell fragments, old keys, and empty brass casings. They moved in the cold air with a delicate sound, thin, trembling, almost like glass being touched by prayer. The back door was partly open. Orson killed the engine. Lumen lurched before he could stop her. She dropped from the truck seat onto the icy ground, stumbled, caught herself, and moved toward the house with a desperation that made Orson's throat tighten. He followed fast, boots crunching over the frozen mud. Lumen, slow, she did not. A dark streak of dried mud marked the porch steps. More mud smeared the lower edge of the back door where claw marks showed in the softened wood. Orson pushed the door open with his shoulder. The smell met him first. Cold tea, damp wool, old paper, a faint medicinal bitterness. And underneath it all, the stale, frightened air of a house that had been waiting too long for someone to enter. "Hello?" Orson called. "Anyone here?" No answer. The kitchen was small, crowded but not dirty. A kettle sat cold on the stove. A chair had fallen sideways near the table. On the table lay a spread of hand-drawn maps showing the migration routes of birds along Lake Superior. Each line had been done with care. Arrows, dates, tiny notes about wind, light, and calls. Beside the map sat a half-disassembled radio, its back panel removed, its wires arranged with a precision Orson recognized immediately. Whoever lived here did not quit on broken things. Then he saw her. A young woman lay on the floor beside the table, partly curled, one arm reaching toward a phone that sat dark and useless a few feet away. She was 24 at most, small-framed, with pale skin made paler by cold and sickness. Her chestnut brown hair was tied low and crooked, strands stuck to her cheek. Her face was oval, delicate but not weak. The jaw set even in unconsciousness, as if stubbornness had remained after strength failed. One leg ended above the knee. Her prosthetic lay near the chair, turned on its side, the brown leather straps twisted. Lumen reached her and pressed her nose against the young woman's hand. The woman did not move. Orson dropped to one knee. "Mom, can you hear me?" He checked her pulse. fast, thin, but there. Her skin was hot at the neck, cold at the hands. Fever and exposure, maybe dehydration, maybe missed medication, maybe all of it. He pulled out his phone and called 911, giving the address from a faded envelope pinned to the wall. Elara Quinn, he read aloud, then looked at the tag on Lumen's collar. E. Quinn. Elara, he said, lowering his voice near her ear. My name is Orson Pike. Lumen found me. Her eyelids fluttered. For a second, gray-green eyes opened. Not fully, just enough for fear and recognition to pass through them. Her lips moved. Orson bent closer. Lumen, she whispered. She's here. The young woman's fingers twitched against the dog's muddy fur. Her face loosened, not into peace exactly, but into relief so deep it looked like pain. Then her eyes closed again. The ambulance arrived 13 minutes later, which in that weather was nearly a miracle of human scheduling. The first through the door was Nurse Talia Mercer, 46, compact and steady, with warm brown skin, dark intelligent eyes, and black curls pinned high in a practical knot. She wore teal scrubs under a gray cardigan and a winter response jacket, her hospital badge clipped straight even in the rush. Talia moved with the calm authority of someone who had learned that panic in a room only made frightened people feel more alone. Behind her came two EMTs, both young, both red-cheeked from the cold. One carried the medical bag. The other unfolded a stretcher in the narrow kitchen with care not to knock over the bird maps. Talia knelt beside Elara. Elara, honey, can you hear me? I'm Talia. We're going to help you. She woke for a second, Orson said. Asked for the dog. Talia glanced at Lumen, then at the muddy paw marks, the open door, the dead phone, the fallen chair, the prosthetic out of reach. Something passed behind her eyes, not surprise, not judgment, recognition. Who called this in? I did. You family? Neighbor? Not exactly. Talia looked at him then, really looked. She took in the faded military jacket, the square jaw, the quiet hands, the careful distance he kept from Elara's body. But the dog came to you. Orson nodded once. Talia did not ask the question her face wanted to ask. She returned to Elara, checking temperature, pupils, pulse, blood pressure, fever, dehydration, possible missed medication. We need to move. A curtain shifted in the doorway behind them. An elderly woman stood there in a quilted purple coat, gripping a cane with both hands. She was thin, bird-boned, perhaps 78, with white hair pinned under a wool hat and sharp blue eyes that missed very little. Her name, she told Talia, was Mrs. Hattie Lowell, and she lived a quarter-mile down the road. I saw the ambulance lights, Hattie said. Her voice trembled, but not from weakness. That girl's uncle been coming around too much. Talia's pen paused over her notepad. Orson turned. What uncle? Wade Bristow? Hattie's mouth tightened. Clean coat, clean car, dirty way of talking, always saying he's helping. Folks who help don't usually take a girl's phone home with them. Talia wrote the name down. She did not make a speech. She did not accuse anyone, but her hand became very still as she underlined something once. The EMTs lifted Elara onto the stretcher. As they moved her toward the door, Lumen tried to follow. Her legs slid. She gave one hoarse cry and pushed herself forward anyway. Elara, Orson said softly, though the young woman could no longer hear him, your dog did enough. At the threshold, Lumen collapsed, not dramatically. Not like in stories where the world stops politely for grief. Her body simply ran out. Her front legs folded, her belly dropped, and her head struck Orson's boot with a dull, exhausted weight. He caught her before she rolled onto her side. A contraction moved through her belly beneath the blanket. Orson felt it. Talia saw his face change. Is she pregnant? Very. Talia looked toward the ambulance, then back at Lumen. Can you handle her? I'll call a vet. Talia nodded, then softened for the first time. Tell Elara that when she wakes, she'll need to know the dog is safe. I will. Mrs. Hattie Lowell stepped closer, eyes wet now. She reached down but stopped before touching Lumen, as if asking permission from a creature too tired to give it. That dog used to walk this road with Malcolm Quinn, she said. Elara's father. He'd tie blue cloth on the posts in winter so the girl could find the bird path when snow covered the trail. Orson looked toward the cedar post in his memory. Blue cloth. Hattie swallowed. Guess the dog remembered what people forgot. The ambulance doors closed. As the vehicle pulled away, Lumen lifted her head once, watching the red lights vanish through the birches. Then she sagged against Orson, shivering so hard her teeth clicked. He called Dr. Marin Bell from the truck. Marin answered on the fourth ring with a voice like gravel and coffee. If this is about your truck heater again, I am not a mechanic. It's a pregnant German shepherd. Severe exhaustion, exposure, maybe early labor. Silence vanished from the line. How far from your cabin? 2 miles. Roads? Bad. Then don't take her to clinic unless she crashes. Get her warm slowly, not hot. Towels, water, quiet. I'm coming to you. Orson looked at Lumen, wrapped in his arms now like a soldier carried from a field no one else had seen. She led me to a girl, he said. Marin's voice changed, losing its bite. Then bring the mother home, Orson. Sounds like she already did her part. He drove back slowly, one hand steady on the wheel, the other resting near Lumen's shoulder, so she could feel he had not left her. Outside, the morning brightened. Ice on the branches caught the sun and burned with small white fires. It was beautiful in the merciless way winter could be beautiful, offering no apology for what it had nearly taken. At the cabin, Orson carried Lumen inside and laid her on the thick blanket by the hearth. She did not fight him this time. She only turned her head toward the door once, toward the road where the ambulance had disappeared. They took her to help her, Orson said. You hear me? She's alive. Lumen's eyes closed halfway. Another contraction rolled beneath her ribs. Orson knelt beside her, the tag cold against his palm. He did not know who Elara Quinn truly was. He did not know why her father had marked a path through winter, or why Brennan's trust had survived long enough to reach this cabin. He only knew that the dog on his floor had crossed the border between animal instinct and human destiny, with mud on her paws and life in her belly. Outside, the pale morning spread across Copper Harbor. Inside, beside the fire, Lumen trembled once more, and Orson Pike understood that the rescue had not ended at the cabin by the bird path. It had only begun. Dr. Marin Bell arrived just before noon, with salt-crusted white along the tires of her old pickup and a storm bag slung over one shoulder. She did not knock politely. She struck Orson's front door twice with the side of her fist, then stepped in the moment he opened it, bringing with her the smell of cold air, horse liniment, wet canvas, and coffee that had been reheated too many times. Marin was 58, broad-shouldered and sturdy in the way of people who had spent their lives lifting things that did not wish to be lifted. Her silver-gray hair was twisted into a low knot, though several strands had escaped and clung to her wind-reddened cheeks. Her face was angular, weathered, and plain in a dignified way, with deep brown eyes that missed very little. She wore a navy, waterproof veterinary coat over a burgundy turtleneck, brown work pants, black rubber boots, and carried a battered leather medical bag that looked older than some of the barns she visited. She had the temperament of a woman who did not waste tenderness on speeches. If Marin cared, she showed it by arriving in bad weather. Where is she? Marin asked. Orson pointed toward the hearth. Lumen lay on a folded wool blanket near the fire. Her black and gold body curled awkwardly around the weight of her belly. The mud had dried in patches along her legs. The pale golden tear-shaped mark beneath her right eye seemed brighter now that Orson had cleaned her face. She lifted her head when Marin approached, but did not growl. She only watched, exhausted and measuring. Marin lowered herself beside the dog with a slow patience that did not insult the animal's fear. Hello, Mama, she said, voice rough but gentle. You look like you crossed half the county and argued with every ditch on the way. She made it 2 miles in freezing rain, Orson said. Marin ran her hands lightly over Lumen's ribs, belly, legs, and neck. 2 miles is plenty when you're carrying a family and running on fumes. She's close. Marin's expression tightened, not with alarm exactly, but with the seriousness of a person hearing a clock start inside a wall. She was already close, Marin said. Cold, fear, exhaustion. Those just pushed her body over the edge. This isn't some sudden miracle. It's labor arriving at the worst possible hour, which means it's arriving exactly like most important things do. Orson looked down at Lumen. Can she survive it? Marin glanced up. If she gets help, if she stops trying to save everyone else for 10 minutes, and if you do exactly what I tell you without turning this into a military operation, I can follow instructions. I've heard that from men before. Orson almost smiled. Almost, within minutes, the cabin changed shape around them. The kitchen table was cleared of radio parts. Towels were warm near the hearth. A low wooden box was dragged from the storage room and lined with clean blankets. Marin set out gloves, a small thermometer, packets of sterile gauze, a bottle of glucose solution, and a tiny bulb syringe. Orson moved where she pointed, silent and exact, but his large hands looked almost absurd, folding small towels for newborn lives. Marin watched him fold one into a hard square. Pike, she said, that is a towel, not a classified document. I was never trained for this. You were trained to improvise under pressure, usually with fewer puppies involved. Life is cruel that way. Lumen panted harder. The sound was shallow at first, then deeper, pulling through her body like wind through a cracked door. Orson knelt near her head, careful not to crowd her. She pressed her nose once against the back of his hand. It was not affection yet. It was acknowledgement. I brought you this far. He understood. I know, he whispered. I'm here. The first puppy came just after noon, slick and dark and impossibly small. Marin worked quickly, clearing the airway, rubbing with a towel, watching for breath. Lumen turned her head, weak but desperate, trying to see. Then the pup moved. A thin cry rose in the room. Orson had heard gunfire echo in mountain passes. Helicopters thudding through night air, the ocean battering steel hulls, men shouting over storms. Yet that small cry unsettled him more than any of it. It was not loud. It did not need to be. It announced that the world, despite all evidence, still intended to continue. Marin placed the puppy near Lumen's belly. Male, she said. Strong lungs, dark coat, little white patch on the chest. Orson stared at the tiny mark. Harbor, he said. Marin looked at him. You naming them already? He found shelter first. That's not the worst reason I've heard. Harbor rooted blindly against Lumen, all instinct and hunger. Lumen touched him with her nose and gave a trembling sigh that made Orson turn away for half a second, pretending to check the fire. The second puppy arrived 23 minutes later, smaller than Harbor but lively, with warm brown paws that looked almost copper in the firelight. Lumen was tiring badly by then. Her legs shook even while lying down. Marin's jaw set in that hard line Orson was beginning to recognize. Come on, Mama, Marin murmured. Stay with me. Orson held a bowl of water near Lumen's mouth. She drank twice, then stopped to check Harbor. You can drink, Orson told her. He's still there. Lumen's eyes flicked to him. For the first time, some of the panic softened. The second pup squeaked as Marin rubbed it warm. Female, Marin said, fussy one. Maple, Orson said. Marin snorted. Because of the pause. Because she looks like autumn refused to leave. Listen to you. One storm and suddenly you're a poet. Don't spread that around. The third did not come easily. The cabin seemed to grow smaller. The fire cracked. The wind worried the eaves, and Lumen's breathing became too fast. Marin worked with calm hands, but her eyes sharpened. Orson had seen that look before in medics. The moment when hope stayed in the room, but stopped making promises. When the last puppy finally arrived, it did not cry. It was tiny, smaller than the others, a dark little thing with a narrow golden streak along one side of its muzzle. It lay in Marin's towel, still as a question no one wanted asked. Lumen lifted her head and gave one broken sound. Orson felt it strike somewhere beneath his ribs. Marin moved at once, rubbing the pup, clearing its mouth, warming a drop of glucose between her fingers. Not yet, she said, not loudly. You don't get to come this far and quit at my table. Orson froze. The sentence, ridiculous as it was, sounded like something Brennan would have said to a frightened young recruit in a snowfield. Not gentle, not soft, but full of a faith too stubborn to kneel. The fire popped behind him. On the kitchen table, among the radio parts he had shoved aside, the old shortwave receiver suddenly crackled. Orson turned. The radio was unplugged. Its casing was open, wires exposed, half the back panel still lying beside it. Yet from the speaker came a faint burst of static, short, broken, then gone. Marin did not look away from the puppy. Tell me that was supposed to happen. No, Orson said. Lumen's ears twitched. Even exhausted, she heard it. Her eyes moved toward the table, then back to the still puppy in Marin's hands. The room held still. For half a breath, Orson felt the old impossible thing again. Not a ghost, not proof, not anything a reasonable man could name. Just a signal where there should have been silence. Marin rubbed harder. Come on, little one. The puppy's mouth opened. Nothing came. Orson stepped closer, unable to stop himself. Breathe, he whispered. Just once. The puppy jerked. A sound came out. Not a full cry. Not yet, only a thread of life so thin it seemed made of light. But it was there. Marin exhaled. There she is. Orson closed his eyes. He did not pray, not properly. But something in him bowed. Nell, he said after a moment. Marin tucked the smallest puppy near Lumen's warmth. Short name for a small fighter. Short names carry better in storms. Marin studied him, then nodded as if accepting an answer with more behind it than he had said. For a while there was only work. Warm towels, small checks, Lumen drinking a little. Harbor nosing with greedy determination. Maple complaining whenever her brother moved too close. Nell lying between them, fragile but alive, her tiny ribs moving like a moth's wings under cloth. It was only after Lumen settled that Marin reached for the worn collar Orson had loosened the night before. This needs to come off, she said. Her neck's rubbed raw underneath. Careful with the tag. I'm always careful. I just don't make a religion out of it. She removed the collar and turned it in her hands. The leather was old, darkened by years of weather and touch. The tag hung from one ring, along with the copper strip Orson had already read. But Marin's thumb paused along the inside seam. "What's this?" Orson leaned closer. A small piece of waxed cloth had been stitched flat beneath the leather lining, nearly invisible unless the collar was bent just right. The stitches were uneven but deliberate. Marin cut them with tiny scissors from her kit and eased the cloth free. Inside was a folded note, sealed against moisture. The writing had faded, but not enough. Orson held it near the window and read, "If Elara ever cannot call, find Pike." Brennan trusted him. Malcolm Quinn. The cabin seemed to change temperature. Marin waited, watching his face. "Malcolm Quinn? I don't know him. But you know Brennan." Orson did not answer quickly. Outside, ice slipped from a branch and shattered somewhere near the porch. Lumen slept lightly, one paw curled around Harbor and Maple, while Nell pressed against the golden fur of her mother's belly. Orson folded the note once, then unfolded it again, as though the words might become easier if handled properly. "Brennan Thorne," he said at last. "He was my closest friend." Marin did not interrupt. That was one of her better qualities. She could be blunt as a hammer, but she knew when silence was the only clean instrument. "It was Alaska," Orson continued. His voice remained level, which somehow made it sound more painful. "Winter operation. Civilian rescue after a storm took out part of a remote settlement. Communications were bad, visibility worse. Brennan went back into a damaged structure for one more person. And you? I was in command." The words filled the room like smoke. Marin's face softened by 1 degree. "You gave an order. I gave the order to pull back. Because the ridge above us was breaking. Because the temperature was dropping. Because if we stayed, we might lose the whole team." "And Brennan?" Orson looked toward the fire. "He didn't make it out before the whiteout closed." Marin was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "That is a brutal piece of math. It doesn't feel like math when you know the man." "No," she said. "I imagine it feels like carrying a coffin no one else can see." Orson's jaw moved once. The smallest puppy, Nell, made a faint clicking sound in her sleep. Lumen stirred at once, touching the pup with her nose, counting without numbers. Marin watched the dog. "The dead don't send pregnant shepherds through freezing rain so old soldiers can punish themselves again," she said. "Maybe they send them because the living still have work." Orson looked at her. "That your medical opinion?" "My medical opinion is that this dog needs food, warmth, and rest. My human opinion is that you do too." Before Orson could answer, his phone vibrated on the table. The hospital number appeared on the screen. He answered. A calm female voice identified herself as Nurse Talia Mercer. Elara Quinn was awake, weak, frightened, but conscious. Orson straightened. "Did she ask for Lumen?" A pause. "She asked before she asked where she was," Talia said. "I told her Lumen was with you. I didn't know about the puppies." Orson looked down at the 3 small bodies tucked against their mother. "Tell her Lumen survived," he said. "Tell her there are 3. Another pause came through the line, softer this time. In the background, Orson heard a young woman's breath catch, then a small sound, not quite a sob, not quite laughter, something in between. Talia returned to the phone. "She heard you." Orson swallowed. "Names?" Talia asked gently. "Harbor, Maple, Nell." There was another muffled sound from the hospital bed. This time it was definitely crying, but not the kind that meant defeat. Orson ended the call a minute later and stood in the middle of the cabin, phone in hand, while the fire warmed his boots and the newborn puppies moved against Lumen's belly. He had begun the morning as a man with a dead friend's name on a dog collar. Now there was a living woman in a hospital bed asking for a dog, 3 newborns by his hearth, and a note from a father he had never met telling him Brennan had trusted him. Trust was a strange inheritance. It did not ask if a man felt worthy before arriving. It simply came to the door, cold and trembling, and waited to see whether he would open it. Orson lowered himself beside Lumen. The dog opened one eye, saw him, and let it close again. "You did it," he whispered. Lumen's breathing deepened. Her body curved around Harbor, Maple, and Nell. Outside, the ice began to melt from the pines in bright drops. Inside, by the fire, life had gathered in the one house Orson Pike had believed would remain empty, and somewhere between the hospital and the cabin, between a dead man's trust and a young woman's tears, an old promise began to breathe. Hospitals had a way of making Orson Pike feel 20 years older. It was not the white walls or the polished floors. It was the smell, the sharp bite of antiseptic, warmed plastic, cafeteria coffee, and flowers brought too late. It reminded him of field stations where men joked until the morphine worked, of waiting rooms where fanfully studied doors, as if Mercy might walk through wearing scrubs. He arrived at Keweenaw County Medical just after 8 the next morning. His faded green military jacket darkened at the shoulders from melting sleet. Under it, his brown-gray shirt was clean but wrinkled, and his boots left faint watermarks along the corridor, despite his effort to wipe them at the entrance. In his left hand, he carried a paper cup of black coffee he had not tasted. In his right, he held his phone, where a photograph waited on the screen. Lumen lay beside the hearth, her black and gold body curled protectively around 3 tiny shapes, Harbor pressed beneath her chin, Maple tucked against her belly, and Nell, the smallest, nestled between her mother's front legs like a coal that refused to go out. Nurse Talia Mercer met him outside room 214. In daylight, Talia looked even steadier than she had in the emergency cabin hours before. At 46, she was compact and composed, with warm brown skin, dark eyes that saw the space between words, and black curls pinned high beneath the practical fatigue of a long shift. She wore teal scrubs beneath a gray cardigan, white medical shoes, and a hospital badge that hung straight as a rule. A purple pen rested in the pocket over her heart. "She's awake," Talia said quietly. "Weak but clear, has she asked?" 3 times. For Lumen, Talia's mouth softened before she asked where she was. Orson looked through the narrow window in the door. Elara Quinn sat propped against pillows, small beneath the hospital blanket but not diminished by it. She was 24, with chestnut brown hair tied low at one side, a few loose strands resting against a pale oval face. Sickness had thinned the color from her skin, leaving faint shadows under gray-green eyes that looked too alert for someone so tired. Her left leg ended above the knee beneath the blanket. The absence did not define her, but the room seemed arranged around it in that awkward way people arrange themselves around things they do not know how to discuss. A tray of untouched oatmeal sat by the bed. On the table beside her lay a folded hospital form, a plastic water cup, and the small blue notebook Orson had brought from her house at Talia's request. Its cover was worn at the corners and marked with tiny drawings of bird wings. "She knows you're coming in," Talia said. "I told her you're not family, but you're the man Lumen found." Orson nodded. Talia lowered her voice. "Let her answer for herself, even if she takes time." Orson looked at her. "I know," he said. Talia studied him for half a second, then nodded back. "I think you do." Inside the room, Elara turned her head when he entered. Her eyes went first to his face, then to his phone. It was not suspicion exactly. It was hunger held behind pride. "Lumen?" she asked. Orson stepped closer and turned the screen toward her. The photograph changed her, not loudly, not all at once, but something braced inside her loosened. Her hand, thin and pale against the hospital blanket, rose toward the screen and stopped just short of touching it, as if she were afraid even a photograph might vanish if she reached too hard. "She made it," Orson said. 3 pups. Elara's mouth trembled. "She's alive?" "She is. And the babies?" "Harbor, Maple, Nell." For the first time, a flicker of amusement crossed Elara's tired face. "You named my dogs puppies?" Orson looked down at the phone. Temporarily. "That sounds like something a man says after he has already made up his mind." "I was under pressure." From puppies, they were persuasive. A small breath escaped her, almost a laugh. It was fragile, but it belonged to her. "Nell," Elara whispered, eyes fixed on the smallest pup. "She looks like she was born just to argue with death." "I've known a few like that," Orson said. "They usually outlive everyone's expectations." Elara looked up at him then, and he saw the sharpness under the exhaustion. She was not soft clay waiting to be shaped. She was flint that had been rained on, buried, stepped over, and still held fire. "My father would have liked that," she said. "Malcolm Quinn?" Her face changed at the name. "You found the note." "Dr. Bell found it in Lumen's collar." Elara closed her eyes briefly. "Dad always thought ahead, sometimes too far ahead. I used to tease him for it." "What was he?" "A winter rescue communications tech. Radios, emergency relays, storm routes. If someone got lost and the official system failed, Dad was the man in a wool hat making some impossible piece of equipment talk again." Her fingers moved over the notebook cover. "He said storms don't kill only by cold. They kill by silence." Orson felt the words settle in him. "He knew Brennan Thorne," Elara continued. "Not well maybe, but enough. Alaska, years ago. I was little. There was a collapse after a winter storm. I remember noise, dust, my father shouting, and then a man with snow in his eyebrows giving me a peppermint candy." Orson did not move. Elara looked at him more carefully. "That was Brennan, wasn't it?" "Yes, I remember," he said. her brow furrowed, reaching through childhood fog. He said, "Breathe first. Heroes do that too." A sound almost came out of Orson, but he held it behind his teeth. Brennan had carried peppermint candies everywhere. Orson used to mock him for it, until the first time a shaking child stopped crying because of one. Elara's hand drifted to the bed rail. Her fingers tapped it lightly. 3 slow taps, 2 quick, 1 slow. Orson's head lifted. She did not seem to realize she was doing it. Tap, 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 tap. He knew that rhythm. Not a code anyone would find in a manual. Just a stupid little knock Brennan used on doors, helmets, truck hoods. 3 slow, 2 quick, 1 slow. Whenever he wanted to announce himself without startling someone. Orson had not heard it in 10 years. "Elara," he said carefully. "Who taught you that?" She glanced at her fingers, confused. "That my dad, I think. He used to knock that way before coming into my room. Said a friend taught him. Why?" Orson looked away toward the window. Outside, pale winter light lay over the hospital parking lot. Cars sat under crusts of ice. A flag snapped in the wind. Nothing miraculous happened. No clock clicked. No radio spoke. No dead man stepped into the room. Only a young woman tapped a forgotten rhythm with tired fingers. And somehow that was worse. Because it was not a ghost. It was proof that kindness had passed from hand to hand without asking permission from death. Orson swallowed once. "He used to do that," he said. "Brennan." Elara's eyes filled, not with fear this time, but wonder. Then Dad remembered him right. Before Orson could answer, footsteps approached in the hallway. Talia appeared at the door, her expression professional but changed by tension. "Elara, your uncle is here." The room seemed to shrink. Elara's shoulders lowered by less than an inch, but Orson saw it. Her gaze dropped to the blanket. One hand slid unconsciously toward the side rail, gripping it. "Wade?" she asked. Talia nodded. "You do not have to see him unless you want to." Elara said nothing. A man stepped into the doorway before silence could become a decision. Wade Bristow was 49, not tall enough to dominate a room by size, but polished enough to take possession of it by habit. He stood around 5'10", with a tidy frame, clean hands, and a charcoal wool overcoat that looked too smooth for the weather outside. His dark blonde hair was combed carefully to one side, silver touching the temples in a way that made him appear respectable rather than old. His eyes were pale blue, almost handsome until they stayed too long on the wrong things. He had a narrow mouth and a practiced smile that arrived half a second after his words, like a light switched on in an empty house. He carried a small bouquet of yellow flowers in one hand and a black leather document folder in the other. "Ellie," Wade said warmly, "you scared us." Elara's jaw tightened at the nickname. Wade's gaze moved to Orson. He measured the faded military jacket, the broad shoulders, the weathered face, then smiled. "You must be Mr. Pike. I'm Wade Bristow, Elara's uncle. Family really, since her father passed." He extended a hand. Orson shook it once. Wade's palm was dry, soft, controlled. "Thank you for helping," Wade said. "Though I wish someone had called me before involving half the county." Talia stepped fully into the room. Emergency responders were called because Elara was unconscious. "Of course," Wade said smoothly, "and we're grateful. She has these spells sometimes. She forgets what she can and can't manage." Elara's face closed. Orson heard it then, not in Wade's volume, because he kept his voice gentle, but in the shape of the words. "She forgets. She can't manage. We're grateful." A net made of politeness. Wade set the flowers on the table without asking. "I've been arranging a safer place for her in Wisconsin. Better support, better oversight. She was supposed to sign a few papers yesterday, but clearly we had a setback." "I didn't agree," Elara said. It was barely above a whisper. Wade smiled sadly, as if correcting a child in public. "We talked about this." "No," she said, a little stronger. "You talked." Talia's purple pen moved over her clipboard. Wade saw it. His eyes cooled, though his smile stayed. "Nurse, I appreciate your concern, but this is a family matter." Talia's voice remained calm. "In this room, it is a patient matter." The words were small. The effect was not. Wade looked at Elara. "Ellie, honey, you're tired. Let me handle this." Orson watched Elara's fingers curl tighter around the blanket. He wanted, with a force that startled him, to step between them, to use his size, his voice, the old authority in his bones. But Talia's warning returned. Let her answer for herself, even if she takes time. So Orson did the hardest thing a soldier can do. He stayed still. Talia walked to the bed. "Elara, would you like Mr. Bristow to remain during your medical check, or would you prefer privacy?" Wade gave a small laugh. "That seems unnecessary." Talia did not look at him. "Elara?" The room waited. Elara's breathing grew uneven. Her eyes moved to Orson. then to the photo of Lumen still glowing on his phone, then to her own hand on the notebook. When she spoke, the words came out thin but clear. I want privacy. Wade's smile disappeared for less than a second. Then it returned. Of course, whatever helps you feel in control. Not be in control, Orson noticed. Feel. Wade picked up his leather folder. At the door, he turned back. We'll talk when you're rested. No, Elara said. Everyone looked at her. She swallowed. I want a lawyer before we talk about papers. Wade stood very still. Then he nodded once, polite as winter ice. If that's what you think you need. It is, Elara said. Talia stepped toward the door. Wade had no choice but to leave. When the door closed, Elara exhaled as if she had been underwater. I hate that he makes me sound small, she whispered. Orson pulled the visitor chair closer, but did not sit until she nodded. What happened last night? He asked. Elara stared at the blanket. For a moment, Orson thought she might retreat behind silence again. Then she began. Wade had come in the evening with papers. He said it was only temporary authority, only for bills, only until she was stable. He took her phone to fix the charging port. He moved her medication from the kitchen counter to the upper cabinet because, he said, the house looked cluttered. She had a fever. Her prosthetic strap had been bothering her all day. After he left, she tried to stand, tried to reach the medicine, slipped, and struck the table on the way down. I remember Lumen barking, Elara said, then scratching at the back door. She couldn't open the front. The back panel is loose near the floor. Dad always meant to fix it. She wiped her face quickly, angry at the tears. She got out because the house was broken. Orson said nothing. Elara looked at him. I don't want revenge. What do you want? She looked smaller then, but only for a breath. When she lifted her chin, the flint returned. I want no one to speak for me unless I ask them to. Talia's eyes softened. I can give you a name, she said. June Ralston. She handles disability rights, guardianship issues, veterans cases. She's sharp. Sharp is good, Elara said. I'm tired of soft voices doing hard damage. Orson felt something in his chest shift. Before he left, Elara asked to see the picture again. She looked at Lumen, at the 3 puppies, and touched the screen at last. I have $20 in my coat pocket, she said. Orson frowned. For what? For food, towels, whatever they need. No. Her eyes lifted. Please don't do that. Do what? Make me someone who can only receive kindness. Her voice shook, but her gaze did not. They're my family. If I can help even a little, let me. Orson had no argument against dignity. Talia retrieved the folded bill from Elara's coat pocket and handed it to him. It was soft from use, creased down the middle, one corner slightly torn. Orson accepted it with both hands. I'll keep account, he said. Elara almost smiled. You seem like the type. I am. As Orson stepped into the hallway, Talia wrote June Ralston's number on a hospital notepad and handed it to him. Call her before Wade does, she said. Orson looked back through the narrow window. Elara sat in bed, pale and exhausted, but her shoulders had changed, not healed, not safe yet, but no longer folded inward. In his jacket pocket, the $20 bill rested beside Lumen's copper tag. One was a message from the past. The other was a claim on the future. Orson closed his hand around both and walked toward the exit, understanding at last that this fight would not be won by force. It would be won by making sure Elara Quinn was heard. By the time Orson returned to his cabin, the afternoon light had gone thin and blue over Copper Harbor. Winter afternoons in that part of Michigan did not fade so much as withdraw. The sun slipped behind the pines early, leaving the woods glazed with ice and the sky pale as old bone. Smoke rose from Orson's chimney in a steady gray column, and for the first time in years, the site of his own cabin did not look like a bunker. It looked occupied. Inside, the fire had burned low but steady. Lumen lay in the wooden whelping box near the hearth. Her black and gold body curved around her newborns like a shield made of fur and exhaustion. The old mud had been cleaned from her legs, though a few dark streaks still clung near her paws as evidence of what she had crossed to reach him. Harbor, the firstborn male, was already the loudest creature in the room, despite being no bigger than Orson's 2 hands. He had a dark coat and a white patch on his chest, and he kept pushing blindly over the folded towel as if searching for an ocean to conquer. Maple, the second pup, with her warm brown paws, preferred the hollow beneath Lumen's chin and protested every time Harbor bumped her. Nell, the smallest, lay tucked close to her mother's belly, narrow golden streak on her muzzle, catching the firelight whenever she turned her tiny head. She seemed too small to contain stubbornness, yet every time Orson placed her gently beside the others, she shifted back to the same warm fold as if she had already formed opinions about the world. Orson stood in the doorway for a moment and listened. Soft breathing, tiny squeaks, the whisper of Lumen's tail moving once when she saw him. His cabin had not sounded like that in 10 years. Life, he was beginning to learn, was not always dramatic. Sometimes it arrived as a wet nose against the floorboards, a puppy complaining under a blanket, a mother dog finally drinking water because she trusted the room enough to look away from the door. Dr. Marin Bell sat at his kitchen table, writing notes on a yellow veterinary form with the fierce concentration of a judge signing a verdict. Her silver-gray hair had loosened from its knot, and her navy coat hung over the back of a chair. She looked tired, windburned, and entirely unwilling to admit either condition. "You're late," she said, without looking up. "I was at the hospital. I assumed you hadn't gone square dancing. How is she?" "Lumen is improving, slowly, temperature better, pulse still tired. She needs small meals, water quiet, and no unnecessary travel for at least a few days." Marin looked up then, her brown eyes sharp beneath tired lids. "And before you ask, no, she should not be moved to my clinic unless she crashes. Roads are still ugly, and a newborn litter does not need adventure." Orson nodded. "Good." Marin's mouth twitched. "You were hoping I'd say that. I was preparing to obey medical advice. That would be a historic first for half the men in this county." Orson took off his faded green jacket and hung it by the door. Elara woke up. Marin's pen stopped. "She knows about the puppies," he said. "She cried. Good cry or bad cry, both. The honest kind, then." Marin finished her note, tore off the top sheet, and handed it to him. "This documents Lumen's condition. Exposure, exhaustion, late pregnancy, signs of prolonged stress. No graphic nonsense, just facts. If that girl needs proof her dog did something extraordinary, there it is." Orson folded the paper carefully. "She may need more than that." "Then get more than that." He did. The first call went to June Ralston. She answered on the second ring, and Orson knew immediately she was not the sort of woman who wasted greetings. "Ralston? June Ralston? Depends who's asking. Orson Pike, Nurse Talia Mercer gave me your number." A pause. Not confusion, assessment. "Talia does not hand my number to fools unless the fool is useful," June said. "Which are you?" "Trying to find out." June Ralston was 67, though her voice had the sharpened age of winter branches rather than frailty. When she agreed to a video call, her face appeared on Orson's phone a minute later. Small, square-screen, sharp woman, white hair cut in a clean bob at her jaw, pale blue eyes behind silver-framed glasses, a narrow face lined with patience worn thin by stupid systems and stubborn men. She wore a camel wool coat indoors, a navy scarf tucked at her throat, and behind her stood shelves packed with case files, labeled boxes, and a mug that read, "Kindness is not a legal strategy. Tell me only what you know," June said, "not what you suspect." Orson did. He told her about Lumen arriving in the freezing rain, about Elara found unconscious, about the phone out of reach, the prosthetic on the floor, the medication too far from the table, the uncle wanting papers signed, about Talia's notes, Marin's veterinary record, Hattie Lowell's warning, and the money Elara insisted he accept for Lumen's care. June listened without interrupting. That alone made Orson respect her. When he finished, June pushed her glasses higher on her nose. "Anger will not help her. Documentation will. I need medical confirmation from the hospital that she was feverish, dehydrated, and not in a condition to sign anything. I need Talia's observations. I need your statement. I need the veterinary report. I need any proof that Wade Bristow interfered with her phone, medication, mobility aids, or financial papers. I can go to her house. She asked me to bring some things. Do you have permission in writing?" Orson hesitated. June's stare sharpened through the phone. "Mr. Pike, noble intentions make terrible evidence if you trespass while holding them. She can text permission. If she has access to her phone, she doesn't. Then have Talia witness verbal consent and note it in the hospital record. Also notify Sheriff Owen Vale before you enter the property. Owen is slow as January, but he is honest. Do you know him?" "I know everyone useful north of Marquette." Orson almost smiled. June continued. "Do not play detective. Retrieve only what Elara requests. Photograph what is plainly visible. Touch as little as possible. If you find documents, bring them sealed. If you find something suspicious, call Owen." "Understood." "And Mr. Pike, yes, do not become another man deciding what is best for her. She has enough of those." The words landed clean. "I won't," he said. June studied him for 1 second longer. "Good, then you may be useful." 2 hours later, with Elara's consent witnessed by Talia and Sheriff Owen Vale, notified by phone, Orson stood again inside the small house by the bird path. The place felt different without the emergency. Quieter, more personal, more wounded. The kitchen still held the faint smell of tea, cold ash, and lemon cleaner. The fallen chair had been righted by the EMTs, but the table remained cluttered with Elara's life. Bird maps, labeled feathers in small envelopes, radio parts, a magnifying glass, a chipped mug full of pencils. On the wall near the stove hung photographs of Lake Superior in different seasons. In one, a younger Elara stood beside a lean, silver-haired man with kind eyes. Malcolm Quinn. He had one hand on the shoulder of a younger Lumen, whose coat shone gold and black in the sun. Orson found the items Elara had requested: her medication list, the charger for her prosthetic knee unit, the blue notebook, a knitted gray sweater, and a small portable radio with tape around the antenna. Then he saw the upper cabinet. It stood slightly open. Inside, on the highest shelf, behind a jar of dried beans, sat a prescription bottle with Elara's name on it. Orson did not remove it yet. He photographed it where it sat. Then he called Talia to confirm whether it was one of the medications Elara needed. Talia's voice went quiet when he read the label. "She told me that was supposed to be on the kitchen counter," Talia said. "It isn't. Photograph it, then bring it." Orson did. Near the coat rack, he found a man's dark wool overcoat hanging among Elara's winter things. Not Malcolm's, not Elara's. Too broad in the shoulders, too recently worn. In one pocket was a phone charging cable. In another, a folded appointment card from a mobility clinic with the date crossed out in blue ink. Orson photographed both before touching anything. He did not curse. He wanted to. Instead, he became very still. Stillness had frightened men more than anger ever had. In the small workroom beyond the kitchen, he found Elara's desk. It was narrow, scarred, and crowded with careful things: a soldering iron, coils of copper wire, a row of cassette tapes labeled in neat handwriting, Spring Cranes, West Wind Under Ice, Dad Storm Stories, Lumen Puppy Sounds blank. That last one made Orson stop. Beside the tape sat a tin box painted with faded yellow stars. The lid read, "Malcolm." Elara had asked for it specifically. Orson lifted it, but as he did, something inside shifted with a soft clink. The lid was not locked. He did not open it fully, only enough to see envelopes, property papers, and a cassette tape on top. The label was written in a man's careful hand. "For Elara, when people speak louder than your own heart." Orson closed the box. That was not his to hear first. He delivered everything to the hospital before dusk. Talia met him in the hallway and took the medication, her expression tightening when she saw where it had been found. "I'll enter it in the notes." Elara sat upright when Orson brought the tin box in. Color had returned faintly to her face, though exhaustion still pooled beneath her eyes. She wore a hospital gown under a knitted cardigan Talia had found, and her hair was tied more neatly now. Without the fever haze, Elara looked younger and older at the same time. Young in the face, old in the guarded way she watched doors. "You didn't listen?" she asked when she saw the cassette. "No." Something in her expression softened. Talia found an old player from the activity room, the kind used by elderly patients who still trusted buttons more than screens. She set it on the bedside table and stepped back. Elara pressed play. The tape crackled, then a man's voice filled the room. Malcolm Quinn's voice was not dramatic. It was warm, slightly hoarse, with the practical tenderness of a father, trying not to cry, because he knew his child might need strength more than tears. "Elara," the recording began, "if you are hearing this, it means the world got loud around you. Maybe someone is telling you what you can't do. Maybe someone is calling fear by another name. Maybe that someone even says they love you." Elara covered her mouth. Orson looked down. Malcolm continued, "Listen to me, little North Star. Losing a leg did not take away your right to stand in your own life. If someone says they care for you but needs you silent to prove it, that is not care. That is a cage painted kind colors." Talia's eyes shone. Orson felt the room shift, as if Malcolm Quinn had stepped through time, not as a ghost, but as a father who had left a lantern burning where his daughter might one day crawl back to it. The recording clicked softly as Malcolm breathed. "And if you cannot find your voice right away, borrow mine until yours comes home." Elara broke then, not loudly. She bent forward over the blanket and cried with one hand pressed to her chest, as if trying to keep something from spilling out after years of holding it in. No one rushed her. That was the mercy of the moment. Wade Bristow arrived 20 minutes later. He came carrying no flowers this time, only the black leather folder. His charcoal coat was immaculate. His dark blonde hair was combed smooth. His smile entered first and searched the room for weakness. "Ellie," he said, "I heard you had visitors." Elara wiped her face. "Don't call me Ellie." Wade's smile paused. Only Orson seemed to notice. "Of course," Wade said. "Elara, I just came to make sure we're still on track. The Wisconsin placement has a room open. These things don't wait forever. Talia stepped closer to the bed but did not speak. Wade looked at Orson. Mr. Pike, I appreciate what you've done, but this is becoming unnecessarily complicated. Orson glanced at Elara. Do you want me to stay or step out? Wade gave a soft laugh. That hardly seems, Elara interrupted. Stay, one word, small, clear in hers. Orson remained where he was. Wade's eyes cooled. You're tired. We can discuss this later. No, Elara said. Her voice trembled, but it did not disappear. I have not agreed to leave. I have not agreed to sign anything. I want my own lawyer. I'm your family. You are not my voice. The room went quiet. Talia wrote something with her purple pen. Wade saw the pen move. His fingers tightened on the folder. This is a mistake, he said, still polite. People are putting ideas in your head. Elara lifted her chin. No. People are finally leaving room for the ideas already there. For the first time since Orson had met him, Wade had no graceful answer. He left soon after, promising to return when everyone was less emotional. But the phrase did not land the way he wanted. It sounded thin now. Small. A paper shield held up against a living woman. That night, Orson returned to his cabin with Elara's $20 bill folded in his jacket pocket. Lumen was asleep when he entered, her body curved around the pups. Harbor had somehow managed to wedge himself halfway over Maple. Nell slept with her tiny muzzle against Lumen's front paw, golden streak bright as a candle mark. Orson found an empty glass jar in the cupboard, washed it, dried it, and placed the $20 bill inside. He wrote on a strip of masking tape in black marker, Lumen's home fund. He stuck it to the jar and set it on the mantel. The money was not payment. It was proof. Proof that Elara Quinn was still the keeper of her own love. Proof that needing help did not erase responsibility. Proof that dignity could fit inside a worn $20 bill and still weigh more than a legal folder. The phone rang just as Orson was adding a second log to the fire. Unknown number. He answered without speaking. Wade Bristow's voice came through, soft and cold. Mr. Pike, you do not understand what you are stepping into. Orson looked at Lumen, sleeping beside the 3 new lives she had carried through a storm. Then he looked at the glass jar on the mantel. I do, Orson said. I don't think you do. This is family. No, Orson said, voice low and even. This is the place where someone stops being spoken over. There was silence on the line. Then Wade said, careful, Mr. Pike. Orson ended the call. He did not raise his voice. He did not threaten. He did not need to. By the fire, Lumen opened one eye, watched him for a moment, and let it close again. Outside, winter pressed against the glass. Inside, the jar caught the firelight and held it. 3 days after the storm, the world outside Orson Pike's cabin looked as if it had been washed clean and forgiven. The freezing rain had passed. The low gray sky had opened into a pale blue morning, and sunlight spilled across the northern woods with a brightness that made every branch glitter. Ice still clung to the pines, but now it caught the light instead of swallowing it. Snow lay in broken patches along the road, and Lake Superior, far beyond the trees, shone like a blade laid flat under heaven. Inside the cabin, Orson had been awake since before dawn. He had cleared the path from the driveway to the porch, salted the steps, and nailed a temporary handrail beside the front door. He did not decorate it. He did not make it look ceremonial. He simply made sure it would hold weight. That was his way of caring. By the hearth, Lumen lay in the wooden whelping box, cleaner and steadier than she had been when she first arrived. Her black and gold coat had regained some of its warmth, and the pale tear-shaped mark beneath her right eye no longer looked only sorrowful. It looked watchful. Her body was still thin, still tired from birth, and the impossible journey through the storm, but her eyes were clearer now. Harbor had grown louder by the hour, pushing his dark little body over every tower edge as if the world owed him more room. Maple slept beneath her mother's chin, soft brown paws twitching in dreams. Nell, smallest and most determined, had developed a habit of making one tiny complaint whenever Orson moved anything near the box. You are going to be trouble, Orson told her. Nell squeaked once. I'll take that as confirmation. A vehicle turned into the drive just after 9. It was not Wade's polished sedan. It was a county transport van, clean but practical, with winter mud along the lower panels. Orson stepped onto the porch as the side door opened. Nurse Talia Mercer came out first, wearing a dark winter coat over her teal scrubs, her black curls tucked beneath a knit hat. She looked tired but satisfied, like a woman who had won a small battle without raising her voice. Behind her came Elara Quinn. Elara wore a cream-colored parka over a pale blue-gray sweater, dark pants, and one heavy winter boot. Her prosthetic leg was secured carefully, the dull metal and brown leather straps visible below the hem of her coat. She held a pair of forearm crutches, and though her face was still pale, her gray-green eyes were awake in a way Orson had not seen before. She was not strong yet, but she was present. That mattered more. A man stepped from the driver's side and shut the door with deliberate quiet. Sheriff Owen Vale was 55, tall and broad without being heavy, with a long face, a square jaw, and a short salt and pepper mustache that gave him the look of an old photograph brought into modern color. His skin was reddened by cold and lake wind, and his brown eyes held the patient steadiness of a man who had seen enough foolishness to stop being impressed by it. He wore a dark brown sheriff's winter coat with a county patch on the sleeve, tan uniform shirt beneath it, black trousers, heavy boots, and a black knit cap. He did not stride toward Elara like an authority arriving. He took off his gloves first. It was a small thing, but Orson noticed. Owen held them in one hand before speaking, as if making sure no one in front of him felt handled. "Morning, Miss Quinn," Owen said. "You set the pace. Nobody's in a hurry." Elara glanced at the porch steps. Orson stepped back from the handrail. "I salted it twice." "That sounds very official," Elara said. "I considered a ribbon cutting. I'm glad you resisted." The joke was small, but it crossed the cold air like a match flame. She moved slowly up the path. Each step required thought. The crutches bit into salted ice, her prosthetic foot landed carefully, and her mouth tightened once when pain caught her near the hip. No one rushed forward. Talia stayed close enough to help, far enough not to take over. Owen waited near the van. Orson stood by the door, making himself part of the house rather than part of the obstacle. When Elara reached the top step, she paused, breathing hard. Then Lumen heard her. From inside came a low, broken sound, not a bark, not a whine, but recognition made audible. Alara's face changed. "Oh," she whispered. She entered the cabin. Lumen lifted her head from the whelping box. Her ears came forward. Her body tried to rise before strength allowed it, front legs pushing against the blanket, ribs trembling with the effort. "No, no, stay," Elara said. But her voice had already broken. She lowered herself carefully to the floor, one crutch sliding away. Orson moved to catch it, but she shook her head once and managed. Not gracefully, not easily, but herself. Lumen stretched her neck toward her. Elara reached both hands into the box and took Lumen's face between her palms. She pressed her forehead to the dog's muzzle, and for a while there were no words at all. The cabin seemed to understand. Even Harbor stopped pushing. Alara's shoulders shook, but she did not sob loudly. Tears slid down her face and disappeared into Lumen's fur. Lumen closed her eyes, breathing in the scent of the girl she had crossed rain and ice to save. "You came back," Elara whispered. Lumen's tail moved once against the blanket. "I'm sorry," Elara said. "I'm so sorry you had to go." Orson looked away toward the window, giving her the privacy of not being watched too closely. Then Nell, offended perhaps by all this solemnity, released a thin squeak that sounded exactly like a complaint. Elara startled, then laughed through her tears. "That one?" "Nell," Orson said. Elara looked down at the smallest pup whose narrow golden muzzle streak glowed softly in the firelight. "She sounds like she has opinions. She has filed several." Harbor chose that moment to crawl directly onto Elara's sleeve and bite the cuff with toothless determination. Maple remained under Lumen's chin, unimpressed by visitors. Elara smiled in a way that made her whole face younger. For a few minutes, the world was only that. A girl on the floor, a mother dog breathing easier, 3 newborns alive beside the fire, and an old seal standing near the door, pretending the tightness in his throat was smoke. Then Lumen did something strange. She lowered her head, nudged through the folds of the blanket, and found the old leather collar Orson had placed near the whelping box. The tag and copper strip had been cleaned but not reattached. Lumen pushed it once with her nose, then again sliding it across the blanket toward Elara's knee. Elara stared. The tag stopped against her hand. On one side, Lumen, E. Quinn. On the other, Pike, cabined by twin pines. Brennan trusted him. Elara picked it up slowly. The room went still, not with fear, but with the weight of something being returned. Lumen looked at Elara, then at Orson, then lowered her chin over the puppies. It was not a trick. It was not magic. It was a mother dog giving back the message after the message had done its work. Elara closed her fingers around the tag. "She doesn't need to carry it anymore," she said quietly. Orson nodded. "No, maybe I do." No one answered, because some sentences become prayers if left alone. A few minutes later, tires sounded outside. This time, Orson knew the engine before he saw the car. Wade Bristow stepped from his dark sedan wearing the same charcoal wool coat, black leather gloves, and polished concern. His hair was combed smooth, his face freshly shaved, his pale eyes fixed on the cabin as if it were a problem that had insulted him by existing. Owen Vale moved first, not blocking the way entirely, simply becoming impossible to ignore. "Morning, Wade, Sheriff." Wade smiled. "I didn't realize this was a public gathering." "It isn't. I'm here for my niece." Owen's voice remained mild. "Miss Quinn is not property waiting for pickup." Wade's smile thinned. Inside, Elara heard his voice. Her hand tightened around Lumen's tag. But she did not fold inward this time. She took a breath, one of those breaths Brennan once taught a frightened child to take, and turned toward the door. Talia stood near her. June Ralston's face appeared on Orson's phone, propped on the mantel for the video call. June wore her camel coat and silver glasses, her white bob neat as a blade. She did not look dramatic. She looked prepared. "Remember," June said through the speaker, "short sentences. Your choices, your words." Elara nodded. Wade entered after Owen, carrying the black leather folder. His eyes swept over the room. Orson, Talia, the phone with June watching, Lumen, the puppies, Elara on the floor. Something like irritation flickered across his face before he painted concern over it. "Elara," he said gently, avoiding the nickname now. "This is not the place for serious decisions. You're emotional." "I am clear," Elara said. "You're recovering." "Yes, and that is why." "No." The word stopped him. It surprised even Elara, but she did not take it back. Wade blinked. "I only want to help." Elara pushed herself up with care. Orson shifted once, ready, but she found her balance with the crutch Talia handed her. She stood unevenly, pale and shaking, with Lumen watching from the box and 3 new lives breathing behind her. "You don't get to keep my phone," Elara said. "You don't get to move my medication. You don't get to answer doctors for me. I am not signing power of attorney. I am not moving to Wisconsin with you, and my father's house is not yours to sell." Wade's jaw tightened. "Elara, you are being influenced." "Yes," she said, "by people who ask what I want before deciding what I need." June's voice came from the phone. "Mr. Bristow, all further communication regarding documents or property will go through my office." Owen added, "And Miss Quinn leaves here today by her own plan, not yours." Wade looked from one face to another and finally saw the truth. The room no longer bent around his voice. He closed the folder. "This is a mistake," he said. Elara's eyes filled, but she did not look away. "Then it's mine." That was the sentence that ended it. Not legally, not forever, but in the soul of the room, something shifted out of Wade's reach. He left without slamming the door. Men like Wade rarely slammed doors when they wanted the world to think them reasonable. When his car disappeared down the drive, Elara sat again, trembling from the effort. Lumen nosed her hand. Harbor squeaked. Maple slept. Nell made one tiny sound as if adding legal commentary. Elara laughed weakly. Before leaving for the rehabilitation center she had chosen, Elara reached into her coat pocket and pulled out another folded $20 bill. Orson raised an eyebrow. "We doing rent again? For food, and for Nell's legal opinions. She charges high." "I figured." He took the bill and opened the glass jar on the mantel labeled Lumen's Home Fund. He placed the money inside where Elara could see it. "You're really keeping a fund for my dog. I've managed equipment worth millions," Orson said. "This more is important." Elara wiped her face and smiled. Then she knelt one last time beside Lumen. "I'm not leaving you," she whispered. "I'm choosing where you get to live until I'm strong enough to bring you home right." Lumen pressed her nose into Elara's palm. Elara looked at the 3 puppies. "You hear me? This is home for now. He'll take care of you." Orson stood by the open door. He did not make a speech. He did not promise the moon. He simply gave one firm nod. But to Elara, to Lumen, and perhaps to the old promise that had traveled through storm and memory to reach that cabin, the nod was enough. Outside, the sun burned brighter on the ice. Inside, the door stayed open. Healing did not arrive in Copper Harbor like a parade. It came quietly in small, stubborn increments, the way thaw comes to a northern road. One drop from the eaves, one patch of mud beneath the snow. One morning when the wind no longer feels like a warning. Elara Quinn did not walk out of the hospital and become whole by sunset. She spent the next several weeks at an independent rehabilitation center outside Houghton, a low brick building with wide windows, sturdy rails, and staff who asked before touching her wheelchair or crutches. She learned how to transfer from bed to chair without apologizing. She learned how to climb into a modified vehicle with hand controls. She learned that pain could be acknowledged without being obeyed. Some days she was brave. Some days she was tired enough to hate the word brave. But she did not disappear. She worked with June Rolston through calls and signed statements. June, sharp as ever behind her silver-framed glasses, filed the necessary papers to block Wade Bristow from accessing Elara's property or speaking on her behalf. Sheriff Owenvale gathered statements without theatrics, his slow calm more effective than any raised voice. Nurse Talia Mercer submitted her notes from the hospital. Elara had been feverish, dehydrated, and in no condition to sign legal documents the night Wade brought papers. Wade was not dragged away in handcuffs. That would have been too simple, and men like Wade often hid behind simplicity. Instead, his power thinned the way lake ice thins under unseen warmth. He lost access to Elara's accounts. His calls went to June. His visits required legal notice. His polite concern no longer opened doors. For a man who had lived by speaking over others, silence became a punishment. At Orson Pike's cabin, life grew louder. Lumen recovered slowly, but she recovered. Her black and gold coat filled out until the honey color along her chest seemed to catch fire in the morning light. The pale tear-shaped mark beneath her right eye no longer looked like grief alone. Now it looked like memory. She still startled at sudden sounds, but less often. She slept deeper. She ate without looking toward the door between every bite. Harbor became exactly what his first cry had promised, bold, noisy, and convinced every towel was a border to be conquered. He grew into his white chest patch as if wearing a tiny medal. Maple remained softer, with warm brown paws and a habit of wedging herself beneath Lumen's chin whenever the world became too busy. Nell stayed the smallest, but only in size. Her narrow golden muzzle streak made her easy to spot, usually in the middle of some trouble she had personally invented. The first time Nell barked, Orson was drinking coffee. It was a sharp, ridiculous sound, more hiccup than warning. He startled so badly he sloshed coffee over his thumb. Nell stared at him as if the entire point had been to test his readiness. "You," Orson said, wiping his hand on a towel. "Era hazard." Nell barked again. Orson laughed. The sound surprised him more than the bark. It came out low and rough, unused, like a door hinge opening after a long winter. Lumen lifted her head. Harbor rolled over. Maple slept through it. Nell looked satisfied, as if she had discovered an important household function and intended to use it often. After that, the cabin changed in ways Orson did not announce. He built a larger whelping pen beside the hearth, then an outdoor run where spring mud would not swallow the pups whole. He replaced the temporary porch rail with a permanent one and widened the path from the driveway so Elara could move more easily when she visited. He bought more towels, more dog food, more coffee than one man needed. The glass jar labeled Lumen's Home Fund stayed on the mantel, holding Elara's 2 folded $20 bills like sacred currency. Beside it, Orson hung Lumen's old copper strip, Pike, cabined by twin pines. Brennan trusted him. Next to it, he finally placed the photograph of Brennan Thorne upright. The first morning he did it, he expected pain to take the room back. Instead, he stood before the mantel and saw not the last snowfield, not the order, not the whiteout that swallowed a friend. He saw Brennan, laughing with peppermint candy in his pocket. He saw a younger Elara carried out of danger. He saw Malcolm Quinn remembering a good man so clearly that he trained a dog to find another one. Death had not ended Brennan's reach. It had only made the path harder to see. Then, one late winter morning, Orson found a new envelope tucked inside the mailbox at the end of his drive. No stamp, no return address, his name written in block letters. For half a second, the old cold returned to his spine. He looked toward the road, toward the pines, toward the place Wade's car had once appeared. Then he opened it. Inside was a photocopy of a storage receipt from a private records office in Marquette. Across the bottom, in Malcolm Quinn's handwriting, were 4 words, "For Brennan's friend someday." Orson stood in the snow, breath turning white in front of him. It was not a threat. It was not from Wade. It was another breadcrumb from a man who had prepared for storms long before they came. That afternoon, June confirmed the receipt was tied to a box Malcolm had stored years earlier, old radio logs, rescue notes from Alaska, and a sealed letter addressed to Elara. Nothing that needed immediate action, nothing that changed the legal battle overnight. But the receipt did change something in Orson. It told him the story was larger than guilt. Brennan had not been only the man Orson lost. He had been part of a rescue that lived on in Malcolm, in Elara, in Lumen, and 3 puppies sleeping by the fire. A man's life, Orson realized, might be measured not by the day he died, but by the door still opening because he had once knocked. He did not tell Elara about the receipt right away, not because he wanted to hide it, but because she was coming that morning, and some truths deserved to be placed gently into a day with sunlight. Elara arrived near noon with Talia driving her from the rehabilitation center. She was using crutches now, moving slowly but with more certainty than before. Her cream parka was open over a blue-gray sweater, and her hair was tied back with a green ribbon patterned with tiny birds. She looked thinner than she had in the hospital, but brighter too, as if her face had begun remembering its own shape. In her arms she carried a rolled set of drawings. "I brought plans," she said. Orson raised an eyebrow. "For an invasion? For my house." They sat on the porch, because the air was cold but no longer cruel. Lake Superior flashed silver beyond the trees. Snow melted from the roof in clear drops. Elara unrolled the drawings across a wooden crate. They showed her father's cabin transformed into a small workshop, radio repair bench along the north wall, a table for children to draw bird maps, shelves for field guides, a listening station where visitors could hear recordings of cranes, wind, ice, and water. "I want to call it North Star Listening Room," she said. "Not a charity, not a memorial exactly. A place where kids learn how to hear what the world is saying before they rush to answer it." Orson studied the plans. "You said when," he said. Elara looked at him. "What? Not if. You said when." She smiled, and this time it did not shake. "I noticed that too." Lumen came out then, stronger now, walking carefully down the ramp Orson had added near the porch. "Harbor Maple," and Nell tumbled after her with the uncoordinated confidence of creatures who believed gravity was only a rumor. Harbor went directly for Orson's bootlace. Maple sat on Elara's foot. Nell tried to climb the rolled drawings and slid backward with great indignation. Elara laughed. The sound moved through the yard like the first bird call after a long snow. Lumen rested her head in Elara's lap. Elara placed one hand on the dog's neck and the other on the old copper strip Orson had brought from the mantel. "You kept it," she said. "Figured it earned a place." Elara looked toward Brennan's photograph through the open cabin door. "Will you tell me about him?" For a long time, Orson watched the light move over the thawing yard. Then he sat beside her. He told her about Brennan Thorne. Not the clean version people put in folded flags, but the living version. Brennan hated carrots with unreasonable passion. Brennan sang the wrong words to every song and blamed the songwriter. Brennan kept peppermint candies in his pockets until they melted and glued themselves to his gear. Brennan once carried a frightened child through snow and made her laugh by claiming heroes were legally required to breathe before panicking. Elara listened with her eyes wet and her chin lifted. "He saved me once," she said. "Yes, and Lumen saved me again." "Yes." Elara looked at the puppies, then at Orson. Maybe people aren't saved all at once. Orson watched Nell attack his bootlace with the seriousness of a battlefield commander. "No," he said. "Maybe not." He took the glass jar from the porch rail and handed it to her. Inside, the two $20 bills rested exactly where he had placed them. "Elara Quinn," he said, solemn as a quartermaster. "Your account remains in good standing." She peered into the jar. "Enough for rent, enough for coffee, and one respectable bag of dog food. I can pay interest." "Deepens. Apple pie?" He looked grave. "I survived 3 combat zones. I'm not sure I can survive homemade apple pie." Talia, waiting near the van, laughed so hard she had to turn away. Elara did not take the jar home. She placed it back on the mantel herself, beneath the copper strip and Brennan's photograph. "Keep it here," she said, "until Lumen comes home with me." Lumen's ears twitched at the word home, Orson noticed. So did Elara, but neither rushed it. By early spring, Elara returned again, this time driving herself in a modified van with hand controls. Sheriff Owen followed at a distance for the first mile, only because, as he put it, roads lie after thaw, and then left her to arrive on her own. June's paperwork had secured temporary protections. Wade had retreated behind legal letters and unanswered calls. The house by the bird path had new locks, new rails, and a front room cleared for the North Star Listening Room. The last scene came on a morning washed gold by sunrise. Snow dripped from the cabin roof. The pines stood dark and green again. Lake Superior shimmered beyond them, not steel now, but silver. Elara walked the new wooden path Orson had built, slower than most, steadier than before. Lumen moved beside her, not pulling, not guarding, simply keeping pace. Harbor bounded ahead. Maple followed the sound of Elara's voice. Nell tried to herd all of them and failed magnificently. Orson stood in the doorway wearing his faded green military jacket over the brown-gray shirt. The door behind him remained open. Warmth moved out into the morning. Spring air moved in. Elara paused and looked back. "You coming?" Orson glanced once at Brennan's photograph on the mantel, the copper strip, at the jar, at the empty chair by the fire that did not feel empty anymore. Then he stepped outside. For 10 years, he had believed he was keeping watch over grief. But grief, like winter, had not been the whole country. Beyond it were muddy roads, stubborn dogs, girls who reclaimed their names, puppies with terrible manners, and doors that could still open. Orson Pike followed them into the light, and this time, he was not guarding the past. He was welcoming life. In the end, Orson learned that miracles do not always arrive with thunder, bright lights, or easy answers. Sometimes they come as a weak scratch at the door in the middle of a freezing night. Sometimes they come covered in mud, trembling with fear, carrying life inside them and hope in their eyes. Lumen did not speak a single human word, yet she reminded everyone of something sacred. Love knows the way, even when people have forgotten it. Elara learned that needing help does not make a person weak, and Orson learned that grief is not the end of a man's story. Sometimes God leaves a door open through the kindness of others, through the loyalty of an animal, or through one small life that refuses to give up. Maybe in our own lives, we are not so different. We all have storms. We all have days when we feel unheard, forgotten, or too tired to keep going. But this story reminds us that one act of compassion can change the road ahead. One open door can save a life. One person who listens can help someone find their voice again. So if this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs a little hope today. Tell us in the comments where you are watching from, and if you believe that God can send help in unexpected ways. And please subscribe to the channel so we can continue sharing stories of courage, loyalty, and second chances. May God bless you, protect your home, and send light to every door that is still waiting to be opened.